So now that we have a place for the user to actually type in, it's time to actually retrieve that data. So this is going to be done in a two-stage process. It's a little bit more complicated than the text box because we have to do an extra step. And it's an extra step that we haven't really learned in detail yet. It'll be coming up in some future lessons, but we're going to kind of use it blindly for this moment. So in the helper.js, similar to what we were doing with the create text box, there's also a create button function. And this will do something very similar in terms of its parameters. It needs text to put in the button. You need to indicate to the user what that button does. A location and a width and height of the button. And then there's this little thing here, click function. What that basically is saying when the user clicks on this button that we're creating, call a certain block of code that will perform a set of actions or a function, very similar to what this is. It's just a block of code to perform a task. In this case, it creates a button. In our program's case, it's going to retrieve the data, calculate the area, and display the results. So let's go back to our main.js. So what we're going to do is first we're going to create the function in order to actually do the actions of retrieving the data and calculating the area and everything like that. But we're going to leave it blank for just a second. So I'm going to say function, and then I got to give it a name. Well, before I give it a name, I need to know what my button is going to be called. So let's go up here for a second. So just like we have a variable to hold the text box that's created, we also need a variable to hold the button that's created. So I could just say var. Now, as I said before, the prefix for button is btn. And what is this btn? What is this button doing? What is its purpose? So I need a descriptive name as purpose. So in this case, I might say btn submit. Very simple. Essentially, it's just a button to track the fact that we're submitting data. And I can just end it off right there. Now back to my function. I need to give my function a name that is indicative or explaining of what the purpose of the function is. Well, I know it has something to do with the button submit. Well, this function is essentially the click event that occurs whenever the button is clicked. So I'm going to call it btn submit underscore click. This is just to be clear that whenever the button is actually clicked, it's going to jump into this code at line 12 and every line between these two opening and closing braces. It's going to execute every single line inside of here every single time that button is pressed. Every time. So if I just sit there spamming that button, it's going to run all the code inside these brackets every single time from top to bottom. We're just going to leave it blank for now because that's not really our purpose. I just wanted to set up the function, the basic skeleton of the function, so we could do the next part. And that's actually creating the button itself. So down where we created our text boxes, we're going to create our button. So we have our btn submit, and we're going to assign it the result of create button. Now going back to helper.js, we can see what data is required of the button. I can find it here. Here we go. Create button right here. So it needs the text. The text is the text that shows up in the button. So I can do whatever I want with that. So going over here, I might say, well, let's just keep it simple. Let's just say submit. I could do something like calculate area. It could be anything I want, as long as it's clear what the purpose of the button is. But submit is pretty common, so that's what I'm going to do. The next thing we need to do is set up a location for the button to actually be displayed. So I want it in line with my other text boxes and whatnot. So I'm actually going to line it up with my text boxes, which means it's going to have an X of 100. I'm going to set it up at a Y of 110, which is just 30 pixels below, very similar to what we were doing with the text boxes, just putting it another 30 pixels lower. And for its size, I'm going to set it a little bit bigger than the text boxes, so we're going to say 150 pixels wide by 20 pixels high. You're going to see that it aligns itself a little bit differently than the text boxes. It's going to be trial and error for a lot of it, but you'll get the hang of it soon. The next thing I need to specify is, well, what happens when they click this button? Well, I want it to run this code. So I have to signify that. So right here, I'm going to write the name of that function. btn submit underscore click. I'm going to close my program off here. Now this doesn't do anything, but just to demonstrate that this works, we're going to do a quick little alert here. Alert, hi. And just to demonstrate this works, we're going to go back over to Google Chrome. We're going to hit F5. And now if I click submit, I get my little alert that says hi. And that's all it does at this point. If I click it again, I get hi. And if I do 1,000,000 times, I'm still going to get the exact same thing. It's running that code inside of it every single time. We're going to get rid of that because that's not actually useful. So now that we have the button to actually retrieve the data, it's time to actually retrieve the data. So basically all we're doing is saying, hey, what value was typed in the text box? Give me that value, please. And then we're going to take that value and we're going to store it in the variables we created to store it with, this length and width. So just like assigning a variable at any other time, I'm going to say length is assigned to, and now whatever on the right hand side is going to be assigned in that variable. So I could write something like this: txt user length dot value. That is saying, give me the value currently in this text box. Now, pardon me, I need to keep in mind a few things. First of all, whatever the user types in and whatever is returned back to the programmer from this little piece of logic, it's going to be in the form of a string by default, which means it's text. Now, that's not really a big deal in this case. So if I do something like this, width equals txt user width dot value, it's not a really big problem because the next line of code is going to be area is assigned the value of length times width. Well, what JavaScript is going to do is going to say, hey, you're trying to multiply two pieces of text. I think you actually want the number version of that text. So it's going to automatically convert length to a number and width to a number, if of course it's possible. If I wrote in Steve for width, I'm going to run into some problems. So this is fine. But if you are doing a different formula, now that obviously this isn't the case here, but if we were doing a different formula and we were adding these two, we would end up with a completely different result. So just for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to do a quick little, we'll finalize it off. We'll output the text of this. So txt, let's output the whole thing. Let's say 15 pixels, Century Gothic. And the text that's going to be displayed, of course, is the area itself. We'll do it in a user-friendly format, though. The area is plus area. And then we're going to put it over 0 pixels over, so it's going to be all the way on the left. We're going to put it lower on the screen. Let's say 550. So it's pretty low on the screen. Now if we run our program, let's put it back to multiplication first so we can see what it's supposed to be. And we hit, we save it and go back in. Now if I hit F5 and I type my numbers in, let's say 2, 3, and I hit submit, I get the area is 6. Perfect. That is exactly what we want. However, if we were to do the math, let's go back and change this to a plus. Watch what happens. Now we come back in here, we write 2 plus 3 again, we got to refresh the page, 2, 3. Now if I hit submit, I get an area of 23. What? Well, what it actually did was, because this information was read in as text, and JavaScript is a weakly typed language, it said, hey, length and width must be text variables. So let's store this value as text. So when it says area is assigned the value of length plus width, it's not actually adding mathematically, it's concatenating the two values. It's saying 2 concatenate with 3, because those are two pieces of text, quote 2, quote 3. Now how do we stop this? Because what if we actually do need to add the values? No problem. JavaScript has a built-in function called number. So if I just write in number, open bracket, and close bracket for both of these, what that actually does is it will convert whatever is inside these brackets into a number. So it'll say, give me the value that's part of text user length, convert it to a number, then store it into length. So if we run our program now, we should actually get the mathematical result of adding length and width. Let's go back in here, refresh the page. Let's try again. So 2, 3, we should get 5, and there it is. Now just to make our program actually do what we expect it to do, we're going to put this back to multiplication, just so you can see the final result. So that's our entire program. We've created our 3 regular variables, and we have what I like to call 3 user interface variables. We have a function that is going to be called every time the user clicks the button submit, and then all the logic inside of that. We have our prompts, which ask the user for their information, and we're creating our 2 text boxes, which is where the user can type, and we're creating our button, which is where the user actually clicks. There's nothing saying you can't have 150 buttons on your screen if you want. And it's a great way to create games in terms of graphical user interfaces. It depends on what you're doing, but that is optionally up to you. So that is everything about user input in a nutshell.